Hey fans, I hope you're all enjoying the program tonight.
You will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death, praying for war.
You're not inside, you are outside, okay?
Sir, I heard it was the best, sir.
It is the best.
The only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
All right, welcome everyone back to the podcast. And today we have a very special guest joining Kyle and me. Alan Van Saun, the man, the myth, the legend, the Crimson Chin. Why don't you introduce yourself, Alan? You've got many things to say, but we'll keep it short because we're going to talk a lot about things that you've been doing throughout the episode.
Yeah, I wouldn't start with very special guests, but I am flattered. So thanks for having me on here. So Alan Van Saun, originally from New Jersey, went off to West Point with dreams of joining the Army and doing great things for the military. After commissioning in 2004, joined the infantry, and then went on to join Special Forces, where I spent the majority of my active duty career. Served with the 101st Airborne Division, deployed to Iraq, joined 3rd Special Forces Group, a couple of deployments to Afghanistan, and then my final deployment was to West Africa, which I know is a topic we'll talk about today. I left active duty in 2019 at the 15.5-year mark, rather suddenly, but again, a topic that we'll talk about later tonight. And found myself moving back to New Jersey, where my wife and I are both from, to set our roots and raise our kids around extended family. And when I left the Army, came back home, did the route that most officers seem to do, which is go into consulting, because consulting will give you a lot of varied experience and exposure to different industries. And while I agree with that to some degree, it was not ultimately the end game. And while I enjoyed it, I had a great opportunity to come along 3 years ago to join a company called Airborne Systems, where I currently work as a business unit manager. We're the leading designer and manufacturer of military parachutes, both domestically around the world. So I get to run about 1/3 of the company, running their domestic business unit. And it's a great role, and still lets me jump out of planes occasionally, which is one of those work perks that really rounds out the total compensation package for my role.
When I first met you, not to interrupt you, because I know there's more to do. You talked about Airborne Systems, and I was like, oh, that's probably like Airborne, like HVAC or something, right? Right. And you're like, no, we make parachutes, and I'm like, I jokingly said to you, oh yeah, do you guys get to test them? I was like, there's no way that these guys test them, and you were like, yeah, once a month. And I'm like, you're kidding? You're like, no, we go and jump. And I was like, do people get hurt? And you're like, yeah, like that's fine. And I was like, wow, that's pretty rad. So I was pretty shocked. I was like, this guy's definitely kidding. But turns out you still found a way to be airborne as a professional.
Yeah, and not only is it you would just assume I do the fun free fall, but I actually willingly still jump static line as well. But hey, an important part of sales is believing and standing behind your product, and so I have to stand behind my product and use the product and know the product, and it's definitely been a great perk to the job, and just speaks to the passion of everybody who works in the company, because most people from the production floor through to the back office functions jump and believe in the product, and so it makes it a great place to work. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. In addition to that, actually still serve in the Army Reserves, where I serve as a ILE instructor, so teaching the majors all the great things they need to do to be field grade officers, and then also do some volunteer work, most notably serving on the board of the Lieutenant Dennis W. Zielinski II Memorial Fund, which is a memorial fund started in the memory of my first-year roommate, Dennis Zielinski, who was killed in Iraq in 2005 with the 101st Airborne Division. So got a lot going on, but it's great, in a really great place, and just happy to be here tonight chatting with you guys.
Dude, you're like
and Alan, you
American.
did the EMBA too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
At,
yes. So spent
my
the
alma
last.
mater, our alma mater.
That's right. That's where we first met. So
Yes.
spent the last 2 years studying at Wharton with the executive MBA program. At the same time, you were in the full-time MBA program, and we were introduced through that program. And so, yeah, it was a great opportunity, and something I'm sure we'll talk about tonight.
Definitely. Yeah. So we're all somehow involved in Pennsylvania. Kyle and his family go back a ways, but from the wrong end of Pennsylvania, right?
It's the Keystone State, so everybody's got to have a piece. The wrong end. It's just a different part. It's more. It's less East Coast for sure.
What part?
Pittsburgh.
What's that?
It's Pittsburgh. Is that where you're from?
Oh, that's where most of my family is from. I'm from
Okay.
Mexico, but I've spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, including 2 years in fabulous Carnegie Mellon.
All right.
So not so we'll have to discuss our I became like an Eagle. I'd never lived somewhere that had a professional football team. Then I lived in Philly and learned to actually really like the Eagles. I know Kyle's not a fan. Most people aren't a fan. Yeah, most people aren't. I've learned, I come out here to the West Coast of California, and people are like, "Are you an Eagles fan?" Like, yeah, I like the Eagles, and they're like, "How?"
Yeah.
The fan base is just known for destroying stuff and in general not acting right.
Which threw a few snowballs at Santa Claus. It was many years ago, and I think people just need to get over it. And having been to many other football stadiums as the away visitor, as an Eagles fan, I can tell you plenty of other fan bases are just as bad. And we'll just leave it at that.
All right.
You could be the Jets fans, who I think are complete masochists. They love being terrible. Like that you will not find a fan base that likes booing their own players as much as the Jets.
Right.
I will say this about Pittsburgh. I have worn a Penn State hat around Pittsburgh. One time I even wore it to a Steelers game. And the number of people that I had come up to me and tell me Sandusky knew, Joe Pa knew, was...
Sandusky definitely knew.
Oh, yeah, Sandusky definitely knew. But Joe Pa, I was like, oh my God, this is insane. So don't wear a Penn State hat to a Steelers game. Apparently, I learned that in a very interesting way.
Noted.
Well, do you do fantasy, Alan? I know Kyle and I both do fantasy. Do you have a fantasy?
I did
team?
fantasy for a while, and then I had to give it up. It was becoming too much of an obsession, and I always also just found myself middle of the pack. So it was just always a frustrating experience. So I walked away from it for a while. Maybe I'll get back into it next year.
I just view it as a game in which I've come to peace that I don't actually have that much control over what's happening. And so if it goes south, it's okay.
Yeah.
The only time I've ever won my fantasy league was when I auto drafted.
I've heard that from a bunch of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember getting so frustrated about it, and I jumped on and I was like, this sucks. My team's terrible. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why they drafted these people. And then half my team I picked up from waivers, and I won. So yeah, it's a total lack of control. But anyway, enough about fantasy football, unimportant things. Today we have some interesting things. Alan, being the Shmee, we're going to first talk about Niger, and people are probably slightly aware of what's happening there, or what has happened, kind of continuing to happen, but pretty worrisome developments in a West African country that until recently did have a fair bit of Western influence. We're going to follow that up with a discussion about Airborne, and the fact that Airborne is still relevant despite what Dirty Legs want to tell us. But it's relevant in kind of a surprising way in Gaza. Following that, we're going to talk about Nippon Steel and the state of the steel industry in the U.S. And then we're going to finally talk a little bit about it, some professional development, and discuss the why MBA, since we normally talk about MBAs and full-time programs, but really do want to talk about Alan's experience and why JMOs and veterans should consider an MBA, what that's like. So first, Niger. This is a country, West Africa. Many people probably couldn't find it on a map, right? It's by Nigeria, it's by Ivory Coast, it's by Ghana, up in West Africa, mostly a desert country. And it had a coup d'etat in July of 2013, led by, and correct me, Alan, if I'm saying this wrong, but General Abdurrahman Tiani.
Mm-hmm.
This was a guy that you'd worked with, right? Explain to us what happened in Niger, and why is it like, why should Americans and why should veterans especially be concerned?
Yeah, so the coup we're talking about is 2023, but in doing research, there's been multiple coups. So you've probably found quite a few years. Yes.
I meant July 2023. Excuse me.
Yeah. So in 2020. Most people didn't know it was couldn't find it on a map. Yeah.
Hold on. It just broke up for just a second, so I'll restart. So sorry, I meant July 2023. So
yes. Yeah. And so let me just step back a second prior to 2023 and just hit kind of a few important points leading up to it. Yeah, most people would not be able to find it on a map. And sadly, the first thing that put it on the map was my 2017 deployment there, where as a company commander, what's called an AOB commander in Special Forces world, one of my detachments was on a mission and were tragically ambushed, and 4 of my soldiers were killed. And the investigation that ensued from that had a lot of issues, a lot of flaws, and ultimately led to me leaving active duty. And that is a whole other story, a whole other podcast episode. But I would just say, if you want, some details on that or the full story, there was a documentary that I helped support on it called 3212 Unredacted on Hulu. And that will give you all the details and kind of really set the stage for what then led up to the coup in 2023. So the situation deteriorated in the region. You had coups in the neighboring countries of Mali and Burkina Faso, and really Niger was the last bastion of hope for our U.S. presence there and the security operations that we were conducting. And in 2023, unbeknownst to anybody who was on the ground or any of us who were still in touch with people in the region, I woke up like most people, turned on the news, and there is the military junta, including my partner force, Major General Barmu, who I worked with very closely during my deployment as the senior special operations officer in the Niger Army, part of the junta throwing over the president and the administration and leading that coup. And so fast forward the past year, because of various laws and regulations we have in place for partnering with countries where there's been a coup, all U.S. forces, which at the height was a couple thousand people between the Army and Air Force, have left the country, and we've really lost our foothold in the Sahel. We've since lost our presence in Chad. We had already lost our presence in Burkina Faso and Mali. And now the U.S. is scrambling to find where would be our footholds in a very important region that, due to its instability and economic and environmental challenges they have there, is somewhere that we need to have a presence, and we have interests there that that need to be, protected and sustained. And it's a real tricky situation right now. I'm not hearing you, Wyatt.
Damn, we're having all sorts of
Sorry.
comms issues
So
today.
what was the role of the U.S. forces in Chad? I mean, what was the partnership like? I mean, obviously, not asking to divulge OPSEC, but you were obviously in situations where there was combat with enemy forces, and what was the U.S.'s goal there, having troops stationed there up until obviously 2023?
Yeah, so there's a whole variety of authorities and different missions that take place, but generally speaking, what we were doing there was training, manning, and equipping in some form or fashion across the region. So when these missions get started, it's not done in isolation. It's not like the U.S. Army, Special Forces come knocking on the door and say, "Hey, here's a bunch of equipment and we're going to train you." No, this is they say it's a whole of government approach. So it's working through the embassy, it's working with the host nation, Ministry of Defense and military leaders, and establishing these missions that allow us to come in, partner with a very willing force, and provide them some equipment, provide them some training, help them get organized, and then advise them in some situations, not always, but in some situations, advise them, whether that's on the grounds, advising during operations, or remotely from a distance back at the base. But generally speaking, that's what we were doing across all of the Sahel. So again, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Nigeria, and depending on the intricacies and the relationships with those different countries, kind of define the level of partnership and how much work is being done to build those forces and create some sort of stability as part of a larger program that may involve, economic support, education support from other, government agencies.
So these guys, they do a coup, they overthrow the past government. Is that just a blanket? I didn't know about the U.S. just saying like we can't operate with countries that have coups. I mean, obviously, we want to encourage and grow democracy, but were they overthrowing a government to install a government that's hostile to U.S. interests generally? Like, did they want us to leave? Did they say like, "Hey, it's time to go. We've now installed a government. Like, get out of here"?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was the tricky part. That was the part that had to be navigated this time last year, because as it happens, we had a couple thousand U.S. Special Forces, Air Force, Conventional Army, National Guard, all on the ground in the country saying, okay, new government, who dis? Trying to figure out, what's the support level. And so for this instance, no, it wasn't, hey, we've kicked out the president, you need to get out of here. They understood our value and our presence, but they also knew they were taking a risk in that the Nigerians knew we have this policy. We will not work with a non-democratically installed government. And so there were some negotiations that took place, a lot of meetings behind closed doors, and there was a policy decision from the U.S. side that said, hey, we can't work with you guys, which in response from Niger was, okay, if you can't work with us, then we kindly ask you to leave, and you have the next couple months to do it. And as of last month, we've met that timeline, and everybody's gone. So it varies in these situations, but in this case, I think because of the relationships we had built and the amount of effort we had put into helping build their military, we were given a lot of leeway in safely and orderly, or leaving there in an orderly fashion.
Yeah, you didn't hear. I mean, Kyle, you were in, and Alan, I'm assuming, did you spend time in Afghanistan across your career?
Yeah, 3 deployments to Afghanistan.
Yeah, so Kyle, you can speak to the feelings of weirdness of seeing Afghanistan, now essentially a Muslim republic that is, completely contrary to every value that we said that we were trying to install. Alan, you obviously have that to contrast. Like, what was it like compared to seeing Afghanistan? What's kind of, as you look at both countries, places that you obviously went to and are very intertwined with you, and you've lost, dear friends. How do those two situations differ now when you look at them? One obviously very chaotic, but both, places that, we obviously spent a lot of blood and treasure in.
Yeah. So I think with Afghanistan, for me, and everybody's viewpoint's different. This is just me, and the experiences I had over there. I never thought that we were going to have this long-term stable situation over there. I would have hoped the withdrawal was done a little bit more organized, but the fact that the aftermath is the aftermath, I think the end, that was going to be the end no matter what we have today. It's just how we got there that I think many of us disagree with.
Yeah.
As compared to Niger, where that really was our foothold in the area. That was our partner. We were their partners of choice. We had strong relationships there. And so it was tough to see us lose it, but I'm still hopeful that at least in that country, given enough time and space, I think once a democratically elected or perceived elected government is put back in place, we could find ourselves going back there and kind of rekindling the relationships that we've built and some of us still maintain. So whereas I see hope in West Africa, I think Afghanistan was just a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I think Kyle, you kind of said the same thing.
Oh yeah, it is a country that has a lot of issues that weren't going to be solved by us in the near term future.
Yeah, it was pretty bad watching that. As I'm sure you were watching, Alan, just feeling a real gut punch. Because it kind of felt like for the first time Americans paid attention to Afghanistan. It was like for the first time in 12 years that people even remembered. Like I had friends texting me being like, "We're in Afghanistan." Like I didn't even know. Like it's been so out of the news, right? Which I'm sure is even doubled up for you. People being like, "What? We're in Niger? Like you deployed in Niger? Like I don't even know what that country is. Like you went over there and you lost men and you spent meaningful moments of your life there." So I guess, do you have an optimistic view of what's going on in Niger? Like that was, and maybe you can also speak to you mentioned kind of a sudden departure from the military that you said was kind of tied into that. If you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, so after the ambush in 2017 and the investigation, that just had a lot of flaws and put a lot on me and nobody else. It was time for me to leave active duty on my terms, but when I left, I never felt any anger or disgust with what I had done, with the missions we did, with the people I served with, and the organizations I was a part of. I was more disappointed, and I actually wrote about this in the New York Times back in 2018, I think. Just disappointed in how the whole process worked out and how the families were not left with the answers they wanted and deserved. And so I like to tell people that I no ill will and no I don't have axes to grind, but my mission after leaving active duty was to make sure that the families got the truth, and that was why I was so willing to support that documentary. And so when you fast forward to this time last year, and you're getting asked the question, was it worth it? And you're thinking about the families, the Gold Star families, who now are seeing our whole mission deteriorate in West Africa. Yeah, I think it was worth it. And like I said, I'm hopeful that we will get back there one day. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year, but give it time. It's a place where we need to have a presence, where we need to have that presence for long-term interests, and I know that the relationships we built will not be lost, and we'll be able to build on those in the future.
Yeah. What was the name of that documentary again, Alan, for people to go watch?
Yeah, 3212 Unredacted. So the ODA, the Special Forces team that was ambushed was ODA 3212, and then Unredacted, meaning when the investigation was finally released to the family by AFRICOM and the Department of Defense, it was a redacted report. And when you looked at it, it was literally just pages of black bars. Just, they took the easy button. They must have used like Adobe Acrobat Pro redact function and just redacted everything in the report and handed these massive binders to the families and said, here's the report that we promised you. And so some folks at ABC News went back through all of it, and through various interviews and piecing together other pieces of evidence, unredacted that report so that the families really knew the truth about their loved ones.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and I haven't watched the documentary. I didn't even know about it. We're going to put that in the notes. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I didn't know about that either. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So we'll put that in the notes. Make sure everyone goes. I knew about that experience you'd had, and I remember seeing that report and just the absolute like bungling of how it was released and the frustration amongst people that were involved. Obviously, families and other service members just feeling like, what are people hiding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thanks for making that, because I know a lot of people, would want to leave something like that behind. And would want to, and you've continued obviously in the reserves, right? Which is something Kyle did. I did not stay in the reserves, but Kyle and you both, Kyle's now out of the reserves, but you obviously continue to serve, which I think is great that you, like you said, there's no axe to grind. You still serve, which is pretty awesome that you're able to get past that. Many people would not.
And I think part of that transition that people, you're thinking about, where do you want to end up? What industry or career do you want to start pursuing? All these other kinds of questions. I think one of those questions people should be asking is, do I still have something to give, and how can I give it? And certainly the Guard and the reserves all offer opportunities. And there's a lot out there, and certainly being in the reserves for the last 5 years now has opened my eyes to a whole other side of the Army that when I was on active duty really didn't know existed. And so being an instructor has been a good way to kind of share the lessons I've learned while on active duty. I feel like I'm still contributing something, and when I stop feeling like I'm contributing something, then I'll just hang it up and move along.
Great. Yeah, Kyle deployed with the reserves, not to a war zone. You went to like Serbia, right?
No. That was on active duty.
Oh, I thought you went. You were in. You didn't go somewhere with the reserves. I thought you went somewhere with the reserves after grad school.
No. I did not. That'd be cool, but I didn't. No, I went to Kosovo on active duty. In addition to Afghanistan, Kosovo, lovely place. Yeah, no. I didn't deploy with the reserves.
You did do reserves for what, a couple years post grad school, right?
No, I mean I did it while I was in grad school.
Oh, you didn't even. Well, I'm completely. All right. Well, shame on me for completely messing up. Kyle's timeline. And credit to Kyle for not. You did retire as a major though, right? From the reserve.
I think retire is a strong word. I left the service.
You left the service. Yes.
No, so like the way
Kyle's political career will be. Let it be documented. That was my mistake.
Yeah, that could have also been another great topic for tonight. Is this nonsense in the news about who can out veteran the other veterans, and it's just gotten gross the way the Waltz Vance battle, and then the way
we talked about that. Kyle actually had a pretty good column that he put in our Substack.
Okay, I'm gonna go back and check it out. Then I thought maybe you covered it on a previous episode, so my fault for not seeing that. I'll go back and check it out.
No, that's a good comment. I mean, this is good stuff. Kyle always jokes that no one wants to like pull down other vets, like pull down vets like other vets, right?
That's right. I did see that. Yeah, I saw that headline. I have yet to read the full thing, but yes, no one hates other vets more than veteran. Yes, that's right. Nice. Yeah, nice. I'll go check that out.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I left the reserves, I was a captain, but I'd made the major list, right? But they couldn't promote me because I was in a slot that wasn't right for my MOS. Like they were like, "Oh, we can't promote you because you're not like on our MTO or whatever. Like your MOS didn't match the MOS you're currently like serving in." But then as soon as I went to the IRR, I got promoted.
Yeah, it's a bizarre world.
Yeah,
let the opposition research, for Everly for Congress show that Kyle was very clear. Yes, it's exactly right, Alan. Like, it's so, if one of Vance or Walt had come out and said like, I was in this war, right, and I led troops in the Battle of Fallujah, like, yeah, that's terrible, right? But it's like this bureaucratic minutia that, and then even before the Walt stuff, I saw people, mostly weren't vets, but also a lot of vets that were like, "Oh, yeah, Vance served, but he was a pogue. Like, he didn't even do anything cool in Iraq."
Yeah,
and it was like,
it's so great.
But before
great.
JD Vance for a ticket, like, look, JD Vance has many strong political opinions. Disagree with those, that's fine, or agree. But like before JD Vance is on the ticket, people are like, "Oh, we need more vets." It's such, this is like, it's such a pity. We don't have more vets.
He was famous for doing this guy who left, a really poor part of the country, joins the Marines, goes to Harvard, right?
Yale.
It was like, I'm sorry, an Ivy League, Yale.
Excuse me.
And like he used the military as like a springboard to move up in life, but it was like, fuck that guy, because it's like, he's
the politics of both. It's like
everything. Yeah, if I like them, they're okay.
Like,
if you don't like them, they're bad.
Right. It's like you watch, right? Like I watched the DNC and it was like, JD Vance, what a terrible person. He's not Midwestern. He went to Yale. And it was like, oh, so to be Midwestern, you have to like that should be a hopeful story, right? We disagree with them or not. And it's ironic because then it was like every speaker past that was from Yale. John Stewart, who's no conservative, was like mocking that, where he's like, why is it that going to Yale is a bad thing? And then getting up on stage are Yale grads. Like that should be, like you said, that should be something that, like, regardless of what JD Vance is, and frankly, JD Vance should be saying it more loudly, like, hey, this is the hope of America. Like, not America's a bad place. I lived the American dream, right? It would be much better if JD Vance highlighted that fact that he that he can rise up rather than that he's being held back, because the military was a springboard, all that. But yes, thank you, Alan. It was a bit of a deviation, but 100% true. If you're a vet, like, don't shit on other vets.
Be true to who you are. Be true to who you are.
Yeah.
And as it ties back, to this platform of helping veterans in their move to a civilian life, is be true to what you did. And this has always been my speech and my pitch to other veterans, is like, most people don't know even the difference between the Army and the Marines. So if you can just educate people and talk about your experiences, there's no need to glorify it. There's no need to embellish it. People just generally want to hear if you were a supply clerk and what that meant, what was day-to-day like in the Army, just as much as they want to hear about what your life was like at, JSOC. It's just wild how that has been convoluted in the post GWAT era. And I would just tell people, just
most people just
own who you are.
We had in my class at Wharton, we had a 22-year Navy SEAL, fantastic dude. He was also an E9 in the Navy SEALs, right, in the teams. And like, here's me, like, conventional Army lieutenant or captain, I guess, when I left. I was really close friends with this guy, and I joked with him once. I was like, dude, what's funny is, like, if we would have seen each other in a military context, like, say I was say you were on post, right, and you saw me, like, you would have like stuck gum across my forehead, like some E9 SEAL to like a lieutenant, right? Conventional. Like I was med services. I wasn't even infantry. And he like laughed. He's like, yeah, probably would have like totally like laughed at you and like said something funny about your haircut. But like we're not you know, because he like, you know, didn't cut his hair because he's a SEAL or whatever. But he's like, you know, now that we're both at Wharton, like none of our like they knew he was a SEAL. They knew that was interesting. But like my classmates were just like, oh, they're vets. Like they didn't even. There was one of my classmates that was a Ranger and like in the Ranger regiment, and one of our classmates was talking to me and this other classmate of mine at Wharton, talking about what we did, and comes up that I was, you know, I was like, yeah, you know, led a medical team in an infantry unit. We were airborne, and that, you know, they're asking kind of what that means, and they're like, whoa, like you were a paratrooper, and I was like, yeah, and this other kid was like, they totally thought that was way cooler than being a Ranger. And I was like, yeah, they don't know what a Ranger is. And he's like, yeah, they thought like med service guy was the most badass, like a doctor that jumps out of airplanes. I'm not a doctor, by the way, but they don't understand what that means. Yeah. So yes, be true to who you are. Like, don't talk down other vets.
There's no need to embellish, and there's no need to put down other vets. Just own your story and tell it.
Anyway,
what quick comment. I think I had one of the, you know, Alan, your background is incredibly interesting. But I think I generally have an interesting background with the helicopter thing. And I want to say 85% of the people I meet at work don't give a shit. Like they just don't, you know, and they're like, so like, yeah.
People, enlisted officer, no, like no one
don't care.
Yeah.
No one cares. Yeah, they like generally have it. They're like, oh, you probably work hard. You're probably like thanks for your service.
They have like no context for it.
Yeah, and that's no context. So, anyway, speaking of Airborne, though, Kyle, did you go to Airborne school?
I did. Point? Yep, I sure did.
Okay, so we're all none of us are legs. You know, speaking about something civilians actually kind of care about. Civilians normally did think it was cool that I jumped out of planes. Mm-hmm. They thought that it was cool that people were pilots. They were like, "Oh, that's kind of sweet," especially like the F-16 pilots.
Oh yeah, I think cool. I think jet pilots are cool.
That's pretty bad. Like, that was sweet. Everyone thought that was pretty cool. Green Berets, people were like, "Yeah, I think I've heard of that." That's like means you're like, and they'd always be like, "Who's better, SEALs or Green Berets?"
Oh
like,
God, yeah.
One of my classmates that was a Green Beret was like, well, it's like asking who's better, like a partner at a private equity firm or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Like both are cool. Like they've clearly worked hard in their careers, but like different, right? You can't compare them. Yep. And somehow my like business school classmates all understood that. This was like in front of a group. But Airborne, that is something people think is cool. Many people in the military like to tell us though that Airborne is irrelevant. And ironically, the conflict in Gaza, not in a military context, but has shown us that at least the parachutes are still very, very relevant. So, Alan, would love to hear about what your company, Airborne Systems, is doing in a very hot conflict right now to alleviate like general suffering with airborne operations.
Yeah. So our product line covers all the different types of parachutes. So on the personnel side, it's, you know, the static line and the free fall, which are just two different styles of parachutes that people wear, two different methods of jumping. And then on the cargo, right? Yeah, T11, MC6 on the static line side, and then RA1, PS2 on the free fall side, which means nothing to most people listening to this, but those are all our parachutes designed and manufactured by Airborne Systems. On the cargo side, you have, you know, just massive, round, very simple parachutes that are able to bring, just oversimplifying this, but bring very heavy objects to the ground, just soft enough that you don't damage them. So dropping vehicles and dropping fuel and all sorts of different supplies. And there's another kind of cargo parachute called the JPADS, the Joint Precision Aerial Delivery System, which in simple terms is a parachute with a little box on it, and that box steers the parachute. So instead of a person pulling the toggles with their hands, two little motors are pulling the toggles and steering the parachute. And so with some GPS coordinates and that little box, you can put supplies into an area that you otherwise can't get to and be pretty precise on where it's going to land. And you can do this from 25 pounds all the way up to 10,000 pounds. And this capability got really popular back in Afghanistan, where a lot of people, including myself, were in locations that were not accessible by ground. So you had to airdrop in supplies, and you wanted to make sure those supplies got to the exact right place. And then the capability kind of atrophied, and we weren't doing a lot of business with it. And then earlier this year, turn on the news, and I forget which country, if it was Jordan, I think maybe it was Jordan or UAE, is on the news dropping in humanitarian aid using JPads that we had trained them on years and years ago. And that event was quickly followed by a bunch of phone calls from other countries in the region saying, we also need that capability and we need it yesterday. And so now we find ourselves once again, kind of reinvigorating this product line that had all but atrophied. And we have parachutes that we're making that are serving a real world mission. And it's not, yes, it's in a war zone, but it's actually for a humanitarian purpose. And it's to make sure that for both sides, to make sure that the humanitarian aid they're trying to get to people on the ground who need it gets to the exact location. So yeah, we like to say, people joke that Airborne's obsolete. Is, well, maybe it isn't.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to me that they haven't highlighted this a little bit more. Like we definitely see a lot about the pier that was like the much maligned pier that may or may not be working. I haven't really kept up with that, but like you'd think that we'd be talking about the fact that like, hey, an American company in New Jersey is enabling massive humanity, and exact, right? There's a lot of problems in Gaza and the West Bank with pushing aid in on like trucks, right? There's a lot of, going a mile in Gaza can basically, you can have $1 billion in aid that suddenly is not there. This solves that problem. Why do you think this isn't as noticed? Like, why are people not talking about this?
Because I think that like most things in the news, if something's going well, it's not news. It's only when things go bad. So when you did hear about this was when I forget which country did it or who did it, but people were trying to put humanitarian aid on a less sophisticated system. So basically the T11 static line parachute, you can do a cargo parachute of that, or a cargo variant of that parachute. And there's also some one-time use, like low cost. It's basically like landscape fabric crossed over itself, and it's disposable. It's a disposable parachute. And so those parachutes were being used, and not all of them were opening. And so you had humanitarian aid landing on houses and crushing people. So in that case, and they were not our parachutes, let that be on the record. Yeah. That made the news. But when it goes well, and it has been going well, it doesn't make the news. And so our part of our culture is we let performance speak for itself. So we don't do a lot of over the top marketing or PR on this kind of stuff. Rather, we let our products performance speak for itself with our customers. And if they want to advertise it, fine. But we like to just kind of be quietly in the background, doing the best we can with our quality products.
That's awesome. I mean, it's cynical take, but I kind of agree that it's not super interesting that, hey, like this solution just works, right? And neither, like there's no antagonist, there's not something that people have to, it's just this works, right? The peer, it's like, oh, people are gonna get attacked, people, this is terrible. There's not really much you can complain about. Like, we're giving food directly to people that need it, or hygienic supplies, or water purifiers, or I'm sure there's a lot of things that we take for granted here. Medicine, right? Insulin, like anything that people could need. Would love also to take, right now you guys have a pretty robust JMO program. I'm guessing that vets, it's a good place to work if you're a vet. at Airborne Systems. Not least of all because you can still jump out of planes if that interests you, right? I know there's probably plenty of JMOs that are very happy to be off airborne orders, understandably so. I saw some pretty crazy photos from my medics, almost all of whom had been in like the 82nd, 173rd, and I guess now we're the 11th up in Alaska.
Yeah, I love the Airborne Division in Alaska. Yep.
Yeah, it was 425 when I was there, but all these medics like rotated through. So I had E7 medics that were, my platoon sergeant was like showing me all the crazy injuries that he'd covered, in his 18 years. And he's like, oh, this guy got degloved. This guy's leg had a compound fracture. And I'm like, why are you showing this to me? Like as we're getting shooted up, like, I don't want to see this. No, sir, it's super cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, would love to hear more about like the JMO program you have and like working at Airborne Systems, clearly a place that like has a pretty cool product.
Yeah. So our JMO program is actually through our parent company, which is TransDigm. So Airborne Systems is owned by a publicly traded aerospace conglomerate called TransDigm. Really another fascinating topic for a podcast episode. And if you ever studied, M&A strategy in as part of your MBA program, you probably came across TransDigm because it's done tremendously well. Currently at 51 companies and growing, and we are one of those 51 companies. And so across TransDigm, there were a bunch of veteran officers, many of us academy grads, who recognize the value of bringing JMOs into the family of companies and really the opportunities that we could provide. And so my boss actually pitched the idea up at TransDigm to the executive team, and they said, and this was a year and a half ago, and they said, yep, sounds good, run with it, which speaks to what, one of the things we offer coming to TransDigm is that TransDigm's model is acquire a company that has proprietary aerospace manufactured parts, and then put some culture and some organization on the company and then grow the company. And part of that is letting the companies operate autonomously. So while we are a TransDigm company and I report to TransDigm quarterly reviews and all the normal kind of things you would expect out of a big corporate entity, otherwise, it's Airborne Systems, and I have a lot of autonomy and the company has a lot of autonomy. And so when you're leaving active duty and you want to get away from bureaucracy, but you still want to be part of a big company, if you have a preference for a publicly traded company, here's a place where you could land and grow. And so, we put this program together. There's, I think, 7 of us on this committee right now. It's kind of like an additional duty. It's not our full-time job, but we've been using the Service Academy career conferences, the MilVet, other platforms coming in here, talking with you guys, just trying to get the word out to JMOs especially, but also we're finding opportunities to do direct hires for people who may be more senior. But with the JMO program, you would come to a TransDigm company, do 6-month rotation, and then go to another TransDigm company, do another 6-month rotation. The idea is to see 2 different companies in 2 different roles. So say ops and then sales, or sales and then ops, or supply chain and engineering. 2 different roles, 2 different companies, and because of the way the TransDigm companies are located throughout the country, do it in a spot where you don't have to pick up and move after that rotation. So Southern California, the Northeast, Pacific Northwest, we kind of have these hubs because of the way the aerospace industry has just grown. And that's what we're offering on your timeline. No set cohort, no set start date. It's again trying to introduce you immediately to that autonomy, that real business responsibility and opportunity, and then at the end of your 1 year, have the chance to be full-time, or to be permanently placed in one of these companies and grow throughout the TransDigm family.
Yeah, Kyle and I always talk about the fact that vets come out, they just we just don't know what we don't know, right? I mean, I'm still young. I mean, I think we're all pretty young in our careers, right? Someone, we probably have several, decades more of careers left, but vets come out and like, you talk about rotating through, and I think to a lot of vets that sounds like, oh my gosh, like that sounds like I'm going to be behind, right? And I'm like not going to be able to figure things out. And we always tell people like you should probably accept that like as a vet, you can't compete directly with someone that has 5 to 8 years of experience. Like you should relish the opportunity that a company is willing to pay you a lot of money to like figure out what you want to do. Whether that's an LVP or like a program like this, or it's like maybe you're good at sales. Like most vets think that's a dirty word, until they see that the salaries that salespeople earn, or they think that like, oh, like, I don't know what, I want to do product management. Like every vet that I talk to like wants to do PM work. And I'm like, would you know what a PM does? And they're like, no, I don't know. It looks cool on Reddit. Like people talk about PM. But I think it's a really good thing that like, if a company's willing to pay you to kind of test out some roles and like not punish you, that's a pretty good thing. What do you think, Kyle? Like when people think about LDPs and like rotational programs, how should people think about those things?
I think from my experience that one of the hardest things to do is to start to get leadership experience in the private sector, because the private sector, especially I think bigger companies, or a bunch of different companies, it can just be more risk adverse when it comes to like promoting people. And like when folks look to hire, they want to hire somebody who they has like the experience they're looking for. And then like, getting promoted within some companies can just be very difficult as well, right? So like having like a defined upward mobility program can give vets that kind of like head start to where they don't have to reprove their leadership capabilities. They can just have the chance to learn on the job and be able to walk the talk and speak, walk the walk and speak the talk. And I think that is a huge advantage, right? Whereas like if you go as a consultant or like a banker, right, like you're kind of like, yeah, you can climb up pretty rapidly in those professions for leadership. But if you like look to lateral route, it might be harder to land in some minutes leadership wise, because people probably just use like a high performer in an individual contributor role.
Yeah, you've done strategy. I mean, you both were consultants, right? You like you're not you don't own the outcome, nor as a banker.
Well, it's like you also don't have the like people like. It's hard to translate the people management experience. If even if you're a consultant, you're all like, oh, as a manager, right? And it's like, what does that look like in a consulting firm? It'd be very different than something you might experience in a big corporation, for example.
Yeah, and a lot of vets think about like startups. I mean, I work for it's private equity backed, so it's very well capitalized. But I work for a smaller company. There's a lot of benefits to go into a big company. As much as people are like, oh, startups are cool. The reality is, if you're not a founder, you're not going to really get that much equity. Like the dirty secret, right? Is like you're not going to become a billionaire by being employee 20. The flip side, like you go to a publicly traded company, like you're going to have a lot of resourcing. You're going to have a lot of benefits. That a small company, like you're going to be asked to do a lot of stuff on your own. That could be interesting. That could be fun. Like if that's your personality, but I definitely think, Alan, that what you're saying, like, it seems like Airborne has kind of been a good mix of that for you, because it's not all in TransDigm. It's kind of been a good place to like figure things out, but still not have to like worry about making payroll the next month, which is
I think all the things you guys are saying ring true with what we're finding is our offering with this program is that because TransDigm allows 51 companies to operate autonomously. You're going to feel like you're at a small company. Like my company's 500 people, but even within that 500, the leadership team is fairly small, and I get to work across all functions of the company. So it feels like a small company, but we're part of a very, very large publicly traded group.
Do you guys ever do mass tax with 500 people? It's like
no. That would be funny though too.
That would be pretty cool. You could do the whole company on like the whole system on a jump.
So then also with the JMO program, speaking what I said kind of in my opening about like I went to consulting because I was promised all this, exposure and experience and variety, and your mileage may vary. And what we're offering is, again, in the period of 1 year, 2 different companies, 2 different distinct roles. So you got that variety very quickly, that varied experience. And then also with that, the experience you're getting, it's not like other JMO programs where it's, hey, intern, go fix my slides and tighten up my spreadsheet. No, we're putting you in actual leadership positions with actual P&L ownership, which is another one you hear people talk about when they get out, like, oh, I need P&L ownership because in the long term, it's always a job requirement. We're going to give you that, and we're going to give you real responsibility at a manufacturing company. And so, I think it's. I'm proud of the program where we've taken it so far in 1.5 years, and excited to see where we're going to grow it.
That's awesome. Well, this conversation's been great. I think we're gonna shelf the Nippon discussion for next week because we're running short on time. But would love to hear, just to finish up, Alan, why did you decide to get an executive MBA? We talked to a lot of JMOs that are coming out of the service. Full-time MBA makes a lot of sense for someone that's planning 2 years ahead. They have time to take the GMAT. It's a good pivot. GI Bill pays, but a lot of vets, find out that like, hey, I get into the civilian sector. Maybe I should have done an MBA, but like I've started working. How should people think about the EMBA? What was your experience and why did you do it? And what is the effect been on your career? I guess it's been short, but I'd love to hear the process.
So I think there's a lot of considerations, when you're debating full-time and executive, and you absolutely hit some of the considerations that are out there. There's also just like, where are you at in your life? Like I couldn't imagine going to a full-time program, asking my wife to, bring home the bread while we also have 2 kids, elementary school age, and then going in and being a full-time college student again. So there's obviously also just where are you at personally, and all those things. I think for executive MBA, it's where you are either established or you do have some work experience, and you're trying to either accelerate the path that you're on, or you're trying to pivot somewhere new mid-career. And so what the executive MBA program, I think, offers compared to what I've heard about full-time programs is that you are going to learn just as much from your peers than you are from the professors. And so the peer group that I was in, there was 250 people in WEMBA, the Wharton Executive MBA program. I was in awe of the accomplishments these people have. And you think, like, I go in there day one, like, okay, I'm a Green Beret, like, watch out. And then, day one of introductions, and you're like, oh, damn, like, wow, there's like doctors and lawyers and people who make decisions at Vanguard that affect the stock market, and all these other people just have these wild experiences. And I found that the value I got out of it for me was basically gaining business experience kind of vicariously through my classmates, sharing their experiences, sharing their stories, spending time with them every other weekend for 48 hours straight, and building out that network, and knowing that now whether I want to continue to grow within TransDigm or I want to pivot into something new, I have all these tools at my disposal, not just the education standpoint of it, the knowledge, but also the network. And so I just say the only other thing is that, like, I felt like after being out a couple years, again, going through this whole notion of like, go to consulting because you're going to rapidly gain all this business experience and blah, blah, blah. I still didn't feel like I had learned enough. And this was a way to really just gain that knowledge and take that acumen to the next level. And so I think I got it. I feel very satisfied with the experience and the education I got. Just graduated in May, so I'm not rushing to make that next move. But certainly, it puts you in a new light in the company you're in, and also opens you up to new opportunities outside of where you might be. And so it's having that flexibility and that confidence, and we'll see where it goes. We'll check back in a year.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, it's also, a lot of people wonder, like, oh, like, will I be looked? So like, your degree does not say the Wharton School Executive Masters of Business Administration, right? It's your LinkedIn. You put MBA. Like, I did the full-time program. If you reached out to me, I wouldn't be like, oh man, Alan, like, says executive. Like, I'm not going to reach out. Like, I go to the Wharton Club of San Diego. I've gone to several meetups, and probably at least a quarter of these people there are executives. It's and like no one even asks. No one's like, oh, did you, like, before I shake your hand, like, full-time or executive?
Right.
Yeah, be like, which secret handshake do you know? I've never encountered that in my travels either. So.
Yeah, again, I think there are two programs that serve two different needs, and so I think it's an important decision. And another thing I tell people, because what's also, I'm sure you guys experience this too, is like the day you get accepted into an MBA program, all of a sudden people start texting you and hey, Alan, my buddy so and so is thinking about it. Can they talk to you? I'm like, dude, I just started on Monday. Like, I don't know what I have to share.
Yeah,
but sure.
You get the LinkedIn messages like, I'd love to follow in your footsteps, and you're like, bro, I just learned what a balance sheet was. Like,
right. And so, but
you knew what a balance sheet was already. But for me, it's full time. I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm going to do next. Like,
yeah. And so, of course, I never turned down the phone call. I want to always help people and offer what I can. So I always caveat it like, yeah, I'll talk to you, but I'm only a month in, or I'm 6 months in, or I'm a year in. But either way, when I talk to people, one of the things I always say is that it's not going anywhere. So I think there's this pressure when you leave the military to go to school again, because in the military, think about it, every time you make rank, you go to school. As a second lieutenant, you go to OBC. First lieutenant doesn't really count. As a captain, you go to
and the military is very regiment. It's like, the civilian sector, there's no one checking to make sure you're hitting rank or that you're like advancing. You can sit in your job for 20 years and you might be really be happier doing that than like getting promoted. But people think of leave the military and they're like, oh, I need to get the next rank. I need to level up.
Right. Or so I need a school to do said job. So it's like, I did the captain's career course to go be a captain. So when I get out, I need an MBA to be a business person, or I need a PMP to do this, or I need a whatever certificate. And certainly LinkedIn's made a lot of money off of these, certifying certificate, whatever things.
And the amount of people I do get that say, hey, I graduated from Wharton, and you look at their like education and it's like course on managerial economics. And you're like, come on, man. Like, don't, like, you can list that, I don't care, but don't put it in your headline like the Wharton School. It's like
it goes back to that conversation we had about veterans on veterans. So anyway, just all that to say, the final point of like, it's not going anywhere. So get the pressure out of your mind. It has to be done here and now. And if full time's not an option for a variety of reasons, then get out, explore the world for a little bit, and then pursue the executive MBA. Or if you just think, executive MBA, I don't want to have to balance that and work and family and all that stuff, and I can manage where I'm at to dedicate 2 years, then do the full-time program. It's just each are going to offer pros and cons, and I think that's why it's good to talk to people who have been through both, one from each, so that you kind of understand what are the pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to do investment banking or consulting, you probably should go do an MBA, like full time. If you want to get into, say, tech, in certain parts of tech, like, you probably need to go do an MBA right away. But like you said, in my opinion, you know, I agree with you, right? Like you can go back, it's okay.
It's always going to be there.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I go to these events and it's like I see very successful people, and like halfway through the 20-minute conversation I have with them, they mentioned like, I was in San Francisco because I did WEMBA, right? So Wharton has 2 campuses. You can do an executive MBA in San Francisco if you're on the West Coast, or in Philly. And like, it's not like, oh, well, I've got to like leave and like go talk to someone else. Like these people are like VPs of very successful companies here in San Diego. So yeah, that's one thing I hear from a lot of vets. It's like, oh, I missed the boat. Do I get an like executive MBA? Like, will that be, will people look differently? And I'm like, no, like no one has any, like no one even knows. Like it's the same curriculum. It's the same program, the same professors, the same admission standards. Like they're not saying like, oh, this is an executive, so like we'll let him in. You can't apply to both. Like it's not like they say, oh, you're not going to make it to the full time. Have you considered executive? So I
also didn't realize it's the same number of classroom hours. I always thought that like because of the full-time, it's full-time, that you somehow get more hours in the classroom or exposure to the professors. But you guys were like, I guess, going to class maybe Monday to Thursday, then you disappear every weekend and go party.
Yeah.
And we're like every weekend, every other weekend cramming in all day Friday, all day Saturday, and a couple 1-week sessions. And allegedly we get the same number of classroom hours. So I thought that was pretty wild.
Yeah, I didn't ever pity the executive MBAs. It seemed like a grind. We get the same amount of classroom hours, more vacations. So if you
right, so we go through the summer. You guys are doing your internship, or
you guys
stuff.
Still did some cool trips and stuff, though, right? Like you guys,
you got a global business week, and then everybody goes to San Francisco for the 1 week of marketing, and then you get access to the same. What do they call them? The GMCs, the global management course, or
the GMCs, the ventures. Yeah, you get to do some pretty sweet stuff. For sure.
Yep.
Anyway, Alan, thank you so much for coming on. In the evening. I hope you don't have a jump tomorrow that you need to be awake and aware for.
No, we're good.
Any last thoughts, Kyle or Alan, before we wrap this thing up?
No, super interesting.
Thanks.
Background, just great American all around. So.
No, I appreciate you guys have me on here, and the offer stands if someone's listening to this and has questions about WEMBA, about aerospace and defense, about life in the Army Reserves, or anything else, or work in the nonprofit, veteran service organizations. Please message me on LinkedIn. Tell me how bad I sounded, and then we'll set up a phone call.
Yeah, we'll put the links to the documentary, and we'll also make sure to link the JMO program, and we'll put some of these clips on LinkedIn and tag you, so people will have that. All right, thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate you guys coming.
See you guys.
Okay. Bye.
And I'm not talking about some $400,000 a year working Wall Street stiff flying first class and being comfortable. I'm talking about liquid. Rich enough to have your own jet. Rich enough not to waste time.